for years, the idea that you couldn't grow new brain cells or couldn't change the brain in some way. That was a belief. And you know why? Because the scientist that was doing the experiment was studying rodents in an unchanging environment. How could there ever be any new connections or new circuitry or new brain cells if there's no new experiences? So I think in the age of information, in the age of technology, ignorance is a choice. And people are beginning to go, hey, I don't need my doctor to tell me about this. I can get on the internet and read it. Hey, I'm going to read a book on quantum physics, and I'm going to ask the mysterious question. I'm going to step outside of convention myself. So once you step outside of convention, you will be considered foolhardy or insane until you're able to produce some type of change. Then you're considered a saint, a holy man, a mystic, a genius. Dare to be original. So I think the camp is divided in a very big way. That's the reason why I'm doing all the measurements. Because I want people to understand that the person that healed themselves of that condition, that traumatic brain injury, I want to show you that their brain is better. They're not just saying, I feel better. No, they are better. I want them to see that. Now, they didn't do that with a drug. They didn't do that with a therapy. They didn't do that with anything except by thought alone. And they made those biological changes. So, to answer the question, the camp is divided in many ways. The old paradigms, and then the new understandings and the new paradigms. And then there's this little kind of bridge in between. And we're only as good as the people that are willing to execute it. In other words, you got to be skilled at this, right? You got to be skilled at this. So if you're not skilled at it, we're not going to see any changes. So imagine 500 people or 450 people coming to an event, a workshop, and we are going to help them cross that river and to become conscious of their unconscious thoughts. You know, the ones that say, you can't, it's too hard, this will never happen, I can't change, I'm too this, I'm too old, I'm too that. Get beyond what their habits are, what they say unconsciously. Do they complain? Do they blame? Do they make excuses? Do they feel sorry for themselves? They're a program. They talk about others. Then look at their emotional states. Oh my God, I've been guilty for the last 30 years. I didn't even know I was guilty. It just felt like me. I've been unworthy. I didn't even know I was unworthy. It just felt like who I am. And all of a sudden, they start becoming conscious of that. And then they start creating a new change for themselves. And one by one, you start seeing these breakthroughs. You start measuring those breakthroughs. You have people on the stage talk about their breakthroughs, show their brain scan, show their heart rate monitor, show the energy change. And I guarantee you, just like an infection can create a disease in a community, I believe that wellness can be as infectious as disease. And you start seeing dramatic changes happening in a small community of people who are outside of the conditioning of their environment. The science has to be done to measure it, but the measurements are only as good as our students. And if they're not doing the work, if they're not developing the ability to sustain brainwave states, if they're not getting beyond their analytical mind, because what separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. And if a person doesn't get beyond their analytical mind, they'll still think within their belief. And I've measured enough brains to tell you is that when you think within your belief, or you think within those limited emotions, you are going to make your brain worse. Without a doubt. It's only when you transcend that analytical mind that you start falling in to those subconscious programs and you begin to step into the autonomic nervous system where you can change your chemistry and your biology. So then if our students aren't good at doing that, then it's still a philosophical concept, pie in the sky principles. But what we want to do is we want to give people the knowledge, the information, and blend the sciences of possibility, whether it's quantum physics or neuroplasticity or neuroendocrinology or epigenetics or whatever it is, hormonal change, psychoneuroimmunology. We want to give them the information and have them reason it. We want them to be able to turn to someone next to them and explain what they just learned so they wire it in there. We want to give them the instruction and have them review the instruction, and then we want to put them into the experience. Not everybody is going to have the experience, but all we need is a few. And if that person or a series of people have that experience, that transformation, and we measure that transformation,
Your energy has far more power than you can even imagine. Get the help you need to access your true power in the next part of the video.
The hormones of stress create the emotions of anger, of aggression, of hostility, of violence, of frustration, of hatred, of fear, of anxiety. And when we live by the hormones of stress, we become very selfish. Why? Because when you're in survival, you got to take care of the self. Your attention is on your body, right? Your attention is on your external environment. There's predators out there. The rush of adrenaline causes the senses to become heightened, and you're a materialist, and you're trying to predict the future because there's better chances of survival if you can predict the future based on the past. When that occurs then, over time, the body begins to break down because it's a scientific fact that the hormones of stress downregulate genes to create disease in the long term. So if you can turn on the stress response just by thought alone, and the hormones of stress can make you sick, then your thoughts can literally make you sick. So the question is, if your thoughts can make you sick, is it possible then that your thoughts can make you well? My definition of addiction is something that you can't stop, right? And most people who struggle from addictions are trying to regulate and alter their internal state. Now, you and I have been hypnotized and conditioned into believing that change happens outside of us. People are looking for something outside of them to change their internal state. It's kind of a Newtonian principle. You wait for your wealth to come to feel abundant. You wait for your healing to occur to feel wholeness. You wait for your success to show up so you feel empowered. You wait for your new relationship to show up to feel love. You're waiting for the event outside of you to happen to change how you feel inside of you. That's cause and effect. And we're conditioned based on consumerism and marketing and programming that that's the way it works. To get something to relieve yourself. And the problem with that is that people begin to confuse true happiness with pleasure, and they're not the same thing. We can become distracted by our external environment for a period of time, but then when you realize that the sports car or the new wardrobe or the vacation or whatever people do to try to make the feeling go away, the novelty of that thing outside of us wears off because we're trying to re-identify with our environment, and that goes away. The next thing that people do is they look for some immediate change. And so they take a drug. They drink something. They gamble. They watch pornography. And the event outside of them changes their internal chemistry. And the moment they notice that the pain or the emptiness goes away, the moment they feel differently, they look to see what caused it. And this is when the attachment begins. Here's the problem, though. The rush of chemical change that takes place, the pleasure centers in the brain, there's a huge release of the pleasure chemicals. And the release, the intensity of those release of those chemicals begins to desensitize the receptor sites in the brain. So as the brain chemicals are released and the receptor sites become desensitized, the next time you gamble, the next time you take the drug, the next time you shop, you need a little bit more the next time. So then what happens is the pleasure centers start to get recalibrated to a higher and higher level. So you're always going to need more to make that feeling go away. Sounds like an addiction to me. And so people get lost because then without the dependency on that external substance, the body, which has become the mind, is craving its relief.